Hi sweet friends, welcome back to Mary's Nest. Today we're making an apple pie skillet recipe with a foolproof crust. It's filled with juicy apples tossed with sugar and cinnamon and topped with an easy, flaky pastry. It's absolutely delicious and everyone's gonna love it. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you like learning about how to cook from scratch, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to click on the notification bell that'll let you know each time I upload a new recipe. Now the first thing that we need to talk about for this apple pie skillet recipe is what type of apples we want to use. I've got a collection here of some Granny Smiths, which are my favorite. I've also got these Honey Crisps, which are actually quite good, tart and sweet, kind of, and crisp at the same time. And then down on the bottom here, I've got some Fuji apples, which are also very nice. And so what I'm going to do is just pick a little selection here, because what I want to do is get about 8 cups once it's sliced of apples. And that's probably going to be 8 cups of apples sliced is going to be about 6 medium-sized apples, and some of these are quite big, but yet the Honeycrisp are quite small. So I'm just going to pick out some apples and then we'll get ready to peel them and slice them up. Now before we even get started with the apples, the first thing that you want to do is get a baking sheet or a baking stone, whatever you have, cover it with aluminum foil and put it on the lowest shelf in your oven. Then you want to heat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Now for this apple pie skillet recipe, we're going to need about 8 cups of apples sliced, and that's usually about 6 medium apples. In this case, I don't really have any medium apples. I've got some really large Granny Smiths and some large Fujis over here, and then I've got some little baby Honey Crisps, and I like all of these for baking. So what I'm going to do is just pick out a collection that I think will equal about 8 cups sliced. I'm going to take 4 of the large ones and maybe about 5 of the Honey Crisp, the little ones, and then we'll get ready to peel them and slice them up. Now there are a lot of gadgets out there to help you with the peeling, the coring, and the slicing of apples. You might have one of those machines that takes the peel off and cores it at the same time. They're very clever. Or you might have one of these that once you peel it, you can simply go down like this and it'll slice it and take out the core. Or you might just have one of these that you can core your apple with. Whatever the case may be, but I find the easiest thing to do personally is to just use a potato peeler to peel them and then just use my chef's knife to cut them up. Well, as I peel and core these, I'm going to put all my scraps in this half-gallon jar. And the reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this to make a fruit scrap vinegar, in this case apple cider vinegar, and that way nothing goes to waste. Well, as I slice the apples, I'm going to be putting them into this bowl. And what I've got in here is a ½ a cup of sucanat. You may know it as rapadura or dried cane juice. If you don't have it, no problem. You can also use a ¼ cup of light brown sugar and a ¼ cup of white sugar. Then next here I have cornstarch. It's 4 teaspoons of cornstarch. I like that to help thicken the apples, thicken the juices of the apples as they cook. If you don't have cornstarch, no problem. You can use all-purpose flour. And then here I've got a teaspoon of cinnamon and then 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And to this, I'm also going to add a teaspoon of vanilla, and then over here I've got a juice of 1 full lemon and 1 whole lemon and the zest as well. I'm just going to whisk this up together, make a little nice mixture, and that's what I'll be tossing the apples in as I slice them. That'll help prevent them from browning, but also I'm going to let them macerate for a little bit and become somewhat softened before I transfer them to the cast iron skillet. Well, I've just peeled this little apple. This is the Honey Crisp with the potato peeler, and then all I'm going to do is slice it in quarters like that and take out the core. And again, I'm going to save this. I'm going to put this right into the jar here that I'm going to add my apple scraps to. And then basically all I'm going to do is, I don't want them to be too thin, but I don't want them to be too thick either. Otherwise it can be difficult to get them to cook. So I'm going to take this slice and I'm going to cut that into about 3s. And that'll be perfect. Maybe maybe about 1/4 of an inch, ½ an inch. And then I'm going to put them in here, and then as I add them, I'm just going to be tossing them in this mixture. Well, I've got my apples all peeled and sliced up and tossed in that delightful mixture, which I wish you could smell it with the cinnamon. It smells so wonderful. And I just wanted to mention the reason that this apple pie skillet recipe is so easy is we're just going to make a single crust, and it's a foolproof crust. If you're a beginner, don't worry, you can't overwork this. It has a little cream cheese in it, and it also has a little apple cider vinegar in it, which really helps to keep it flaky regardless of how you work it. Since we're just using a single crust that's going to go on top of the apple pie, in a sense this is very similar to a cobbler. The only difference is we're going to use a flaky pie crust versus a biscuit dough recipe, where you would just put dollops of the biscuit dough on top of the apples and then bake it like that, so when it comes out of the oven it looks like a little cobblestone path or road, and that's how it got its name, cobbler. Now I'm just going to set these apples aside just to macerate a little before we get ready to put them into the skillet and then make the dough to put on top. But I just want to give you a little tip. If we were doing a double crust pie, what I would do at this point is I would let them, as I said, I'm going to set them aside to macerate, and I would let them maybe macerate anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, and then I would strain out the juices that are going to be released by the apples as they're mixed in this mixture of the sugar and the cinnamon and so on and so forth. I would take those juices, I would put them in a little pan and reduce them by about half, and then add them back into the apples before I put them into the crust to actually make a traditional double crust apple pie. If you do this, it is a little extra work, but if you do this, and I'll make an apple pie like that one day and show you how I do that. If you do this, you don't get those really runny, watery type apple pies. Plus, it helps your lower crust stay nice and flaky and drier, so it's not absorbing so much moisture. So it's a good little tip to keep in mind. But this is easy because we don't have to worry about any of that. We're just going to let it macerate a little, and then we're going to throw everything into the cast iron pan, top it with the dough, and a foolproof one at that. You'll see we're going to make that next. And you bake it up about 50-55 minutes, and you have a wonderful apple pie. Alrighty, well now we're ready to make the crust, and I'm going to bring you in closer and go over all the ingredients, and you can see exactly what I do. Now I've got a cold bowl here with cold flour in it. I measure it out and then I put it in the fridge just to keep it cold while I'm preparing the apples. And what this is 1 cup of all-purpose flour. I use organic. It is white flour. Those of you who know me know that I like to use whole grains, but when it comes to pie crust, we don't eat pie that much. I really feel white flour, white all-purpose flour works the best. But you can use whole wheat flour, but if you do, look for whole wheat pastry flour. It's a little harder to find. In my area, I can only find it at Whole Foods, but you can use whole wheat pastry flour. So we've got the 1 cup of flour, and then next I've got 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt and 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to put that right in there. And then I'm just going to whisk that up just to get that nicely distributed. And then the next thing that we're going to do is add about 2 ounces, about 1/4 of a cup, a little more than 2 ounces. It's 1/4 of a cup of cream cheese. So what I did here was, if you buy the large block, which is 8 ounces, just cut off a 2-ounce portion and a little bit more, and that way that'll be about 1/4 of a cup. Cream cheese, or about 1/4 of a cup, should, if you're weighing it, would be 2 1/4 ounces. So that's, and if you buy the little block, the 4-ounce block, then just cut it in half and take a little extra to round that out to 1/4 of a cup. So what we're going to do is, this is very cold. I'm just going to put this right in like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, this is 6 ounces of butter. So it's 3/4 of 1 stick of butter. And I've cut it into cubes when it was cold and kept it in the freezer until I was ready to make the pie crust. Now don't worry what you're going to do with that, the extra 2 tablespoons of 2 ounces of the butter from the stick. We're going to use that we're going to mix that, top the apples with that before we put the crust on. So just put that extra bit of butter aside for now, and this is the one that's frozen, and we're going to just put this right in, just like that. And now what we're going to do, if you have a pastry cutter like this, you can certainly use it. But as I said, this dough is very forgiving, and if you work quickly and you want to use your hands, by all means you can do that too. And I actually like to use my hands. So I'm just going to get in here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to break up this cream cheese like this, best I can, and I'm just going to work quickly. The butter is nice and cold. I mean, it's just, if you can see, so it's actually quite hard, and from being in the freezer. And then I'm just going to keep working this and pushing the butter between my fingers and getting this to be just in small pebble sizes. Now, one thing I do want to mention while I'm doing this is, if you want, you can use half butter and half lard. In addition to the cream cheese, you take the 6 ounces of butter, and you can take 3 ounces of butter and 6 ounces of lard. 3 ounces of butter and 3 ounces of lard. And if you do use lard, I recommend the leaf lard. And the reason for that is leaf lard is the lard that's taken from around the kidneys of the pig, and it has a higher water content than the rest of the lard, and it has less of a lardish flavor. You know, it's actually relatively flavorless. Plus, it has that extra little bit of water in it. And that's why bakers love it, because when it is in a pastry dough and it hits the heat of the oven, it releases that moisture that's in it, and that's what creates the light, flaky pie crust. Now, I like to always, if I do use lard, I do like to use half butter and half lard. And the reason is because I think you just can't beat the flavor that a butter pie crust gives you. But you can certainly do half and half. That's what I would recommend. If you're doing a savory crust, maybe you want to go with all leaf lard, but I still think having that little bit of butter makes a nice flavor to it. Well, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep working in the butter with the flour until I get it looking like sand, and then I'll show you what the next step is. Well, this is the perfect consistency you're looking for. You've got some, pea-sized or a little larger shapes. That's fine. You've got some that's more sand-like. This is the perfect texture that you're looking for. Just get a good look at that. If you're new to making pie crust, this is exactly what you're looking for. See, having some of those larger pieces is great. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is add in 1.5 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And this is going to help with the acid's going to help with the flakiness. And then over here, I've got some ice water, and we're going to measure out 1 tablespoon. And normally this recipe might take 1.5 tablespoons. I'm going to have to play it by ear a little. It's very, very damp here right now. We've had a lot of rain, so I think I'm just going to go with 1 tablespoon, and then I'm just going to quickly work that in through that. And now I'm going to get a piece of plastic, and I'm going to transfer this onto a plastic, and then we're going to use that plastic to help us get this into a disc shape. Now I'm just going to dump this pastry dough out onto a piece of plastic wrap, and then we're going to get ready to knead it into shape. We're going to make a disc, and then we're going to refrigerate it for 45 minutes before we roll it out and put it on top of our pie. So all I'm going to do now is just work this with the plastic wrap until I get it into when it all comes together, and I get it into the disc shape that I want. And I'll keep doing that, and then I'll bring you back when it's where I want it. Well, this is perfect, and it's exactly where I want it. And I'm just going to lift it up, and hopefully you can see that you can still see bits of the butter worked throughout the dough. And that's what you want. You don't want to try to get it where the butter is completely blended in. You do want to have some of the butter still in its pieces in the dough, because what's going to happen is when that hits the heat and it releases the moisture that's in it, it causes steam, and that's what will help with making the flaky pie crust. Alrighty, well, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator to rest for about 45 minutes, and then we'll come back and roll it out and top our pie. And I'll also show you how I'm going to put the apples now in the cast iron pan, and I'm going to put that in the refrigerator too. So everything will be nice and cold and all ready to go into the oven. Alrighty, well now I'm going to dump these apples into the cast iron frying pan, and I'm just going to put it in like that. This is a 10-inch traditional, this one is a Lodge cast iron, and I just love it. I've had it a long time and it's well seasoned. And I just want to get every last apple in there and all the juice. Perfect. Okay, let me even that out. Oh, this is just going to be scrumptious. Even that all out nicely. And then what we're going to do is dot it with the butter. This is the softened butter. This was what was left over from the 6 ounces that we used in the pie, in the pie crust. This is that remaining little bit. It's very soft, but that'll be fine. And just get that little last bit in. Perfect. Now I'm going to put this in the refrigerator too, and that way the rim of the pan will be nice and cold when I adhere the pie crust, and also the apples will be cold, and that'll keep the pie crust cold as we get it into the oven. Well, I've got my dough out of the refrigerator. It's nice and cold. It's had a chance to rest, and now I've floured my board, floured my rolling pin. I'm going to unwrap the dough, and I'm going to roll it out into about a 12-inch circle to fit on top of the cast iron skillet with the apples in it. Now I floured the top of the pie dough, and I'm just going to start rolling it, and I'm going to work from the center and out. And don't worry if it cracks. We're going to push it all back together. As I said, very forgiving, and you're not going to have any trouble with this. So I'm just going to keep working this and I'm going to move it so it doesn't stick, and I'm just going to keep working it like this until I get it to the size that I want. Well, I've got this all rolled out the way I want it, and I think you might be able to see, you can still see the butter that's in it, and it's still nice and cold. I've brushed off the excess flour. I measured it just to make sure it's almost 12 inches around, and the cast iron frying pan is 10 inches across, so it'll work perfectly. This is the ruler that I use here in the kitchen from my homeschooling days. It says Mom. Alrighty, well let me go get the apples out of the fridge, and we'll get ready to top it with the pie crust. Well, I've got the apples in the cast iron frying pan, and now I'm going to just gently pick up this dough, and don't worry, it's ripping a little. We're going to make it look perfect. We're going to put it on to the put it right onto the cast iron frying pan like this. We're going to roll it out, and we're just going to flip it over, say a little prayer. And now we'll just start, whoops, it's getting away from me. We're going to start pinching it down, and it's all going to work out perfect. And all I'm doing is just tucking it in right into the apples, and just tucking it under. It's a little, I have the lights on so that when I film this, it's bright for you all to see. But it does start to make the butter melt a little in here. But I've got some little extra pieces here. I'm just going to patch a little, and it'll come fine, and that's what I want you to see when we bake it up. Even under these lights, it's still going to be beautiful and flaky because of that cream cheese and the vinegar. Well, alrighty, that's all tucked in. Now I'm just going to make some marks. My mom always made an A for apple, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go down like that, just a sharp pointy knife, and then just come across like that, and then make the A. And everybody will know it's apple pie. Well, I've got the A drawn on it, and I've put in a few more little slits to let the steam out. Now I'm going to paint it with 1 beaten egg. And that's it. Just a plain egg. I like the way the yolk of the egg gives it a nice deep sheen. You can also use cream, or you can use just an egg white if you like a lighter sheen, but I like when it gets that rich golden brown. And I'm just going to paint that all around. That's going to be great. And then what I'm going to do is just dust this with a little sugar. And what I'm going to use is the Demerara sugar that's got a large crystal shape to it. Alrighty. Oh, that looks perfect. It looks a little rustic, but that's okay. That's the beauty of cooking in a cast iron pan. It's okay if it looks rustic. Alrighty, now I'm just going to sprinkle it with some of this sugar. It's nice. It's kind of like a brown sugar, the Demerara, but it's very crystally. And that'll give a nice, not only a nice color to the top of the pie, but it'll also give it a nice little crunch. So I'll just finish doing that. And then I've got my oven, as I mentioned, preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I like that I preheat it early because I like the oven to be really hot before I put the pie in. So I'll just finish this up, I'll put the pie in, and next thing you know, it'll be baked. Well, I just took it out of the oven. It was about 50 minutes at 425, and it just looks wonderful. I can't wait to let it cool a bit and scoop some out and take a taste. Well, I let it cool a little bit, and now I'm ready to go in. Oh, listen to that. Oh, the crust sounds wonderful. So what we're going to do is just scoop out a little of this. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. And get some more of those apples in there. Alrighty. Let's see how this is. Oh, I just want to show you. Oh, I have to bring you in closer so that you can see how flaky this crust is. And I'll bring you in so you can see that. But let's give it a taste and see what we think. Oh my goodness. That's so tasty. The apples with the cinnamon and the little bit of lemon juice and that crust. Oh my goodness. It's really got a lovely, lovely flavor and a lovely crunch. I'm going to bring you in closer so you can see the flakiness of it. And have another bite. Excellent. Now I just want to show you this crust. Look at this. I don't know if you can tell how flaky this is. It's just, the apple's dropping, it's just glorious. And it's got a beautiful crunch to it. Can you see the flakiness, the layers? Oh, it's just wonderful. Just hear that? Oh, beautiful. Oh, I think you're going to really love this. See, I don't know if you can see all the layers there. Oh, it's just wonderful, just glorious. I just wanted to get some more pieces here to see if you can see how flaky this is. It's just wonderful. Let me hear that crunch, and then see, maybe you can see the layers of how flaky it is. I hope this shows up on camera. But it's a wonderful dough. And as I said, so forgiving. You know, you just get it in the pan. Don't worry, you know, under the lights, I had the butter started to melt a little, but you saw I got it on and it created such a beautiful pie. No one will notice if you have to batch a little or something, and the taste is just delicious. I think everyone will enjoy this thoroughly. Well, as you can see, my husband and I enjoyed a few pieces of this. It was absolutely delicious. Be sure to check the description below where I'll put a link to the recipe. Well, that's all for today, but I look forward to seeing you next time right here in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless. Before you go, be sure to check out these two videos. I think you'll enjoy them. And subscribe to my channel and click on the little notification bell that'll let you know each time I upload a new video. Well, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.